Welcome, everybody. I want to ponder on planning your financial future. Yes. I have a Taurus ascendant, so it's time for me to lock in, and it's time for us all to lock in. So let's take this real slow. With the meaning and importance of personal finance. This book is Planning Your Financial Future by Louis E. Boone, David L. Kurtz, and Douglas Hurth, the third edition. And so we start with the meaning and importance of personal finance. Personal finance is the study of the economic factors and personal decisions that affect a person's financial well-being. Personal finance affects and is affected by many things we do and many decisions we make throughout our lives. On one level, personal finance involves money know-how. It is essential to know how to earn money as well as know how to save, spend, invest, and control it in order to achieve set goals. The reward of sound money management is an improvement in one's standard of living. Standard of living consists of the necessities, comforts, or luxuries an individual seeks to attain or maintain. On another level, personal finance is intertwined with each person's lifestyle, the way we live our daily lives. Our choice of careers, friends, hobbies, communities, and possessions is determined, at least in part, by personal finances, and yet our personal finances can also be determined by our lifestyles. If, for example, you're a college student living independently on a shoestring budget, you will probably have to make financial sacrifices to achieve your educational goals. Where you live is determined by the school you attend and how much you can afford to pay for rent. Your vacation is set by your academic schedule, and your checkbook balance, your clothing depends on the climate and your budget. All these lifestyle decisions are partially determined by your personal finances. So they give 3 reasons why personal financial planning is so important in the environment. Sluggish growth in personal income. So personal income in the United States has grown very slowly between 1982 and 2001. For example, personal income adjusted for inflation and taxes grew at an annual rate of slightly more than 2%. Will this trend continue? Some think so. Many economists forecast annual increases of no more than around 1 to 2% in real personal income over the next 10 or 20 years. Rather, you need to save and invest more money, stick to a budget, and make major purchases wisely. You cannot count on rising personal income to improve your standard of living. So, changes in the labor market, of course, job security and the notion of work has changed, of course, tremendously. The traditional model of working for the same company for one's entire career is very rare. Many people entering the workforce today will change jobs and employers several times during their working lives. Some will end up working part-time or on a contract basis with little job security and fewer benefits. Others will take time off to care for small children or elderly parents. A goal many people have today is to start their own business and work for themselves. Further, it is estimated that 1 in 4 workers today will actually be unemployed at some point during their working lives. Frankly, you will never know when your employer will downsize and eliminate your job. Review today's headlines. Announcements of companies cutting jobs are common. These changes make sound personal financial management even more important. You have to keep your career skills up to date as well as accumulate sufficient financial resources to weather an unexpected crisis. And we're reading this as someone who's been unemployed since December 2024, and now it's February 26, 2026. Jobs have not gone back to me. Jobs have rejected me. I don't know what's going on with my karma, but hey, volunteer work, I'm looking for that. So, more options. The number of choices today in such areas as banking, credit, investments, and retirement planning can be bewildering. You can do most of it, your banking, with a brokerage firm, and then buy mutual fund shares at a bank. Even the simple checking account has gotten more complicated. The typical bank offers several different types of checking accounts, each with its own features and fees. Choosing the wrong account for your needs could easily cost you $100 or more in unnecessary fees each year. One of the first things you'll do when you start a new job is make decisions concerning benefits. The typical employer may offer several choices in such areas as health insurance, disability insurance, group life insurance, and retirement plans. If you select an inappropriate health insurance plan for your circumstances, for example, you may end up paying thousands of dollars more in out-of-pocket costs. Making poor decisions concerning retirement savings, even if you're still in your 20s, can make it difficult to achieve a financially secure retirement. We take the position that choice is a good thing, and having more choices in the personal finance arena means the consumer is likely to find what he or she is seeking. At the same time, however, a longer menu of choices means it's easier to make mistakes. The more informed you are, the better choices and fewer costly mistakes you are likely to make. So personal financial planning is just as important whether you're 20, 40, or 60 years old, whether you're single or married with children, and whether your annual income is $20,000 or $200,000. Many experts say that if you can't stick to a budget when you're making $20,000 a year, you'll find it difficult to live within your means, even if your income doubles or triples. The fact that sound planning is a lifelong activity, of course, doesn't mean your financial goals and plans will remain constant throughout your life. They won't. The major goal when you're young may be to buy your first home or pay off your college loans. For older people, the major goal is probably making their retirement funds last for the rest of their lives. Further, the importance of personal finance goals will change as you go through life, although we should all start planning for retirement as soon as we begin our careers. The relative importance of retirement and estate planning increases as retirement nears. Choosing the right life insurance policy is a major decision for a 30-year-old father of two, but not for a 65-year-old grandfather. On the other hand, estate planning may be far more important for the 65-year-old than it is for the 30-year-old. Some advice for individuals in their 20s who are just beginning their careers can be found in the Personal Finance Toolbox on page 5. We'll go over that, where it lists in approximate order what the experts suggest your financial priorities should be. As always, the first step is to figure out exactly where you currently stand financially. And getting professional help. Well, there's dozens of financial self-help books, such as this. So a financial plan is a guide to help you reach targeted goals in the future, and these goals could include buying a home, starting your own business. So let's go into the Personal Finance Toolbox, getting started in your financial priorities. So let's assume you're in your early 20s like myself, recently graduated from college, not me, and just got your first quote-unquote real job. So congratulations, you're probably making more money than you ever have before. However, it is also likely you're spending more money than ever, and you probably came out of college with some debts, student loans, credit cards, an auto loan, and so forth. You know you need to start managing your money, but where do you start? You start by establishing some financial priorities. According to the experts, those in their 20s should do the following in the approximate order. Figure out where you currently stand financially. Many people, including those well beyond their 20s, have no clue about what they already own, assets, and what they already owe, liabilities. Further, while most people have a fairly good idea how much they make each month or year income, many would have a hard time detailing how much they spend and on what expenses. One of your first priorities should be to prepare a balance sheet and income statement. Put yourself on a budget. Budget is not a four-letter word, nor does a budget imply sacrifice or always doing without. Rather, a budget is a tool that allows you to plan and monitor your expenses. People who stick to budgets are much less likely to experience a financial crisis of their own making. Insure yourself against financial ruin. Insurance isn't a topic most people like to think about. For one thing, in order to collect from an insurance policy, something bad has to happen to you. And for another, insurance can be very confusing. Nevertheless, you need to be properly insured. This means having at the bare minimum health insurance, some form of disability insurance, auto insurance if you own a car, and either renter's or homeowner's insurance. If there are family members who depend on you financially, you may also need life insurance. Get your debts under control. One common mistake many recent college graduates or even just young 20-year-olds make is to allow their debts to get out of control. I have experienced this. Remember, many individuals come out of college already owing money. A good rule of thumb is to keep all your installment debt payments, credit cards, student loans, and auto loans under 20% of your monthly income. Further, you should pay off your high-rate loans as fast as possible, given the choice between paying off the balance on your Visa card, which carries an average interest rate of 18%, and putting money into a savings account, paying 5%. Pay Visa first. Start saving for retirement. You're going to need to save lots of money by the time you retire, and the earlier you start, the easier it is to meet retirement savings goals. Sign up for your employer's retirement plan as soon as possible. These days, it's likely to be a so-called defined contribution plan, such as a 401k. Employer-sponsored retirement plans are also a great tax shelter. Set up a regular savings program. The best way to save money is to treat it like a fixed expense, just like rent, and have money automatically transferred from checking to savings. You need savings to help you through financial emergencies, the result of events such as illness or unemployment. But you also need savings to make major purchases, such as buying a new car or even a home. You may not be able to do everything immediately, but you do need to get started. Take it one step at a time. The worst mistake you can make is to procrastinate. So, the financial planning process starts with values, goals, financial strategies, implement and monitor plan, and evaluate and revise plan. And this is what it looks like. So, how can we maximize income and wealth? Well, we work smarter to improve the possibility of promotion, seek retraining for a better, higher paying job, take career risks that may pay off in the long run with a higher salary, make sound investment decisions. These are all examples of implementing the first step. The amount of money you earn is a vital part of any financial plan, and it is up to you to make the most of your opportunities. There are really two basic uses of money: consumption and savings. Even if you are a regular saver, you'll still spend most of your income. You must try to spend every dollar wisely and make it every major buying decision part of your overall financial plan. Avoid impulsive spending or giving into the hard sell. Remember, if you can reduce your monthly living expenditures by 10% through effective consumption, that's like getting a 10% pay raise. It's not just big expenditures you need to watch. Cutting back your spending on small items can make a difference. Little things do add up. For example, having a cappuccino every other day instead of daily could save up about $7 a week. Invest that savings at 9% interest and you'll have over $56K in 30 years, depending on the person, of course. So what I want to go over is, if they have it in the book, which I'm sure they do somewhere, about unemployment in more detail. Well, the importance of continuing education. Even after you are established in a career, your need for education continues. In many occupations such as engineering, nursing, and teaching, you are financially rewarded for completing advanced degrees. Doesn't really say if you're not in college what to do. The self-employment option. So according to recent statistics, more than 8.5 million non-agricultural workers are self-employed, meaning simply that they work for themselves. Self-employed workers make up around 7% of today's workforce. Some experts believe the ranks of the self-employed will increase sharply in the next few years, perhaps exceeding 10% of the workforce within the next decade. While many students believe that college will provide them with the necessary skills to compete in the job market, others see it as providing a broad-based education that will be helpful in running their own businesses. Being an entrepreneur offers many benefits and rewards. The harder you work and the more risks you take, the greater the potential reward. Being self-employed is also fraught with problems and pitfalls. However, moreover, some people have personalities that may make them better suited to become successful entrepreneurs. Like personality characteristics, high energy level, need to achieve, self-confidence and optimism, vision, tolerance for failure, creativity, tolerance for ambiguity, internal locus of control. Working at home, like myself at the moment. Millions of self-employed people work at home on a full or part-time basis. One estimate places the number of people who work primarily at home at more than 2.5 million. For example, the publishing industry is staffed by thousands of freelancers who perform research, copy editing, proofreading, and design duties. Virtually all of these people work in their homes rather than in offices. Another example is the computer industry. Thousands of software and computer design engineers rarely see the inside of their company's offices. Working at home frees workers from the drudgery and expense of commuting and gives them more time for work and personal commitments such as taking care of young children. Advances in computer and communication technology have helped to make working at home more accessible for both employers and employees. And talks about the effectiveness of job search techniques like friends, acquaintances, relatives, campus career planning and placement office, job service centers, private placement agencies, professional associations listings, newspaper advertisements and trade publications, electronic bulletin boards and databases, direct solicitations of employers through the mail or internet, cover letters, and the job interview. So usually job interviews feel like humiliation rituals in my opinion. But here are some tips for surviving job interviews. Come in prepared. Learn as much as you can about the organization and the job you're seeking. Make a good first impression. Arrive early. Dress appropriately. Introduce yourself in a courteous manner and have a firm handshake. Take along a business publication or a copy of the company's annual report to read since you may have to wait. Always bring an extra copy or two of your resume. Answer questions confidently, positively, and directly. Be prepared to answer questions such as, why do you want to come to work for us? And what can you contribute to my organization? Interviewers are trying to assess such things as flexibility, willingness to learn, ability to fit into an organization, and work with a team, and problem-solving ability. As a result, many interviewers will ask questions about your work experience and extracurricular activities, even if they don't appear to directly relate to the job you're seeking. Try to avoid saying anything directly negative about yourself. Listen. Interviewers often look for listening skills, so don't be a chatterbox. Men are especially guilty of talking too much during interviews. Use body language to show interest. There's nothing wrong with taking a moment to think about your answer to an interviewer's question. Try not to come across as too self-centered. Be prepared to ask questions. Virtually all interviewers will give you the opportunity to ask questions, so come prepared to ask thoughtful, meaningful questions. For example, ask about advancement opportunities, the typical career path, or additional details about the nature of the work. This demonstrates to the interviewer that you have genuine interest in working for his or her organization. However, in an initial interview, stay away from questions concerning salary and benefits. If you get called back for a second interview, you'll have the opportunity to ask detailed questions about compensation. Make a good lasting impression. Ask about the next step in the process. Be sure to thank the interviewer and send a personal thank you letter to anyone with whom you spoke. That's a reach, but hey, if you really need a job, these are reaching, but re-entering the workforce. Each year, thousands of workers leave the workforce to pursue other goals. Their astrology YouTube channel, raising kids. Re-entry to the workforce, especially for those who have not worked recently, can pose a challenge. Experts contend that employers want evidence that your knowledge and skills are current. In other words, that you're up to speed as well as up to the job. Some tips for keeping your skills current include taking part-time volunteer jobs, working on freelance projects, or taking refresher courses. These things can boost your confidence as well. According to Priscilla Cleman of Boston-based Career Strategies, often people who've been out of work feel devalued. Rebuild outdated networks by joining trade or professional associations or national peer organizations. So that was just the first chapter, but then they get into personal financial statements and budgets. So yeah, pretty interesting book. A lot of food for thought financially here. And I just want to close up with an excerpt from A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle, which is the book I'm going to be reading a few excerpts in every video. Content and structure of the ego. The egoic mind is completely conditioned by the past. Its conditioning is twofold. It consists of content and structure. In the case of a child who cries in deep suffering, because this toy has been taken away. The toy represents content. It is interchangeable with any other content, any other toy or object. The content you identify with is conditioned by your environment, your upbringing, and surrounding culture. Whether the child is rich or poor, whether the toy is a piece of wood shaped like an animal or a sophisticated electronic gadget, makes no difference as far as the suffering caused by its loss is concerned. I think we actually already went over this. This is a good one. Does the lack of them make you feel inferior to others who have more than you? You need to be alert and honest to find out, for example, whether your sense of self-worth is bound up with things you possess. Do certain things induce a subtle feeling of importance or superiority? Do you casually mention things you own or show them off to increase your sense of worth in someone else's eyes and through them in your own? Do you feel resentful or angry and somehow diminished in your sense of self when someone else has more than you or when you lose a prized possession? Let's read The Illusion of Ownership, and then we'll close off with this. It's like a few pages long. Actually, no, it's not. It's just like a page or a few. So, The Illusion of Ownership. Again, this is A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. To own something, what does it really mean? What does it mean to make something mine? If you stand on a street in New York, point to a huge skyscraper and say, "That building is mine, I own it," you are either very wealthy or you are delusional or a liar. In any case, you are telling a story in which the thought form I and the thought form building merge into one. That's how the mental concept of ownership works. If everybody agrees with your story, there will be signed pieces of paper to certify their agreement with it. You are wealthy. If nobody agrees with the story, they will send you to a psychiatrist. You are delusional or a compulsive liar. It is important to recognize here that the story and thought forms that make up the story, whether people agree with it or not, have absolutely nothing to do with who you are. Even if people agree with it, it is ultimately a fiction. Many people don't realize until they are on their own deathbed and everything external falls away that nothing ever had anything to do with who they are. In the proximity of death, the whole concept of ownership stands revealed as ultimately meaningless. In the last moments of their life, they then also realize that while they were looking throughout their lives for a more complete sense of self, what they were really looking for, their being, had actually always already been there, but had been largely obscured by their identification with things, which ultimately means identification with their mind. Blessed are the poor in spirit, Jesus said, for theirs will be the kingdom of heaven. What does poor in spirit mean? No inner baggage, no identifications. Not with things, nor with any mental concepts that have a sense of self in them. And what is the kingdom of heaven? The simple but profound joy of being that is there when you let go of identifications and so become poor in spirit. This is why renouncing all possessions has been an ancient spiritual practice in both East and West. Renunciation of possessions, however, will not automatically free you of the ego. It will attempt to ensure its survival by finding something else to identify with. For example, a mental image of yourself is someone who has transcended all interest in material possessions and is therefore superior and is more spiritual than others. There are people who have renounced all possessions but have a bigger ego than some millionaires. If you take away one kind of identification, the ego will quickly find another. It ultimately doesn't mind what it identifies with as long as it has an identity. Anti-consumerism or anti-private ownership would be another thought form, another mental position that can replace identification with possessions. Through it, you could make yourself right and others wrong. As we shall see later, making yourself right and others wrong is one of the principal egoic mind patterns, one of the main forms of unconsciousness. In other words, the content of the ego may change. The mind structure that keeps it alive does not. One of the unconscious assumptions is that by identifying with an object through the fiction of ownership, the apparent solidity and permanency of that material object will endow your sense of self with greater solidity and permanency. This applies particularly to buildings, and even more so to land, since it is the only thing you think you can own that cannot be destroyed. The absurdity of owning something becomes even more apparent in the case of land. In the days of the white settlement, the natives of North America found ownership of land an incomprehensible concept, and so they lost it when the Europeans made them sign pieces of paper that were equally incomprehensible to them. They felt they belonged to the land, but the land did not belong to them. The ego tends to equate having with being. I have, therefore I am. And the more I have, the more I am. The ego lives through comparison. How you are seen by others turns into how you see yourself. If everyone lived in a mansion or everyone was wealthy, your mansion or your wealth would no longer serve to enhance your sense of self. You could then move to a simple cabin, give up your wealth, and regain an identity by seeing yourself and being seen as more spiritual than others. How you are seen by others becomes the mirror that tells you what you are that tells you what you are like and who you are. The ego's sense of self-worth is in most cases bound up with the worth you have in the eyes of others. You need others to give you a sense of self, and if you live in a culture that to a large extent equates self-worth with how much and what you have, if you cannot look through this collective delusion, you will be condemned to chasing after things for the rest of your life in the vain hope of finding your worth and completion of your sense of self there. How do you let go of attachment to things? Don't even try. It's impossible. Attachment to things drops away by itself when you no longer seek to find yourself in them. In the meantime, just be aware of your attachment to things. Sometimes you may not know that you are attached to something, which is to say identified, until you lose it or there is a threat of loss. If you then become upset, anxious, and so on, it means you are attached. If you are aware that you are identified with a thing, the identification is no longer total. I am the awareness that is aware that there is attachment. That's the beginning of the transformation of consciousness. And then he dives into wanting, the need for more. The ego identifies with having, but its satisfaction in having is a relatively shallow and short-lived one. Concealed within it remains a deep-seated sense of dissatisfaction, of incompleteness, of not enough. I don't have enough yet, by which the ego really means I am not enough yet. As we have seen, having, the concept of ownership, is a fiction created by the ego to give itself solidity and permanency and make itself stand out, make itself special. Since you cannot find yourself through having, however, there is another more powerful drive underneath it that pertains to the structure of the ego, the need for more, which we could also call wanting. No ego can last for long without the need for more. Therefore, wanting keeps the ego alive, much more than having. The ego wants to want more than it wants to have. And so the shallow satisfaction of having is always replaced by more wanting. This is the psychological need for more, that is to say, more things to identify with. It is an addictive need, not an authentic one. In some cases, the psychological need for more, or the feeling of not enough, that is so characteristic of the ego, becomes transferred to the physical level, and so turns into insatiable hunger. The sufferers of bulimia will often make themselves vomit so they can continue eating. Their mind is hungry, not their body. This eating disorder would become healed if the sufferers, instead of being identified with their mind, could get in touch with their body and so feel the true needs of the body rather than the pseudo-needs of the egoic mind. Some egos know what they want and pursue their aim with grim and ruthless determination. Genghis Khan, Stalin, Hitler, to give just a few larger-than-life examples. The energy behind their wanting, however, creates an opposing energy of equal intensity that in the end leads to their downfall. In the meantime, they make themselves and many others unhappy, or in the larger-than-life examples, create hell on earth. Most egos have conflicting wants. They want different things at different times or may not even know what they want except that they don't want what is, the present moment, the eternal now. Unease, restlessness, boredom, anxiety, dissatisfaction are the result of unfulfilled wanting. Wanting is structural, so no amount of content can provide lasting fulfillment as long as that mental structure remains in place. Intense wanting that has no specific object can often be found in the still developing ego of teenagers, some of whom are in a permanent state of negativity and dissatisfaction. The physical needs for food, water, shelter, clothing, and basic comforts could be easily met for all humans on the planet were it not for the imbalance of resources created by the insane and rapacious need for more. The greed of the ego. It finds collective expression in the economic structures of this world, such as the huge corporations, which are egoic entities that compete with each other for more. Their only blind aim is profit. They pursue that aim with absolute ruthlessness. Nature, animals, people, even their own employees are no more than digits on a balance sheet, lifeless objects to be used, then discarded. The thought forms of me and mine, of more than, of I want, I need, I must have, and of not enough pertain not to content, but to the structure of the ego. The content is interchangeable. As long as you don't recognize those thought forms within yourself, as long as they remain unconscious, you will believe in what they say. You will be condemned to acting out those unconscious thoughts, condemned to seeking and not finding, because when those thought forms operate, no possession, place, person, or condition will ever satisfy you. No content will satisfy you as long as the egoic structure remains in place. No matter what you have or get, you won't be happy. You will always be looking for something else that promises greater fulfillment, that promises to make your incomplete sense of self complete and fill that sense of lack you feel within. And chapter 2, we're only a few pages away from. This video is 31 minutes. I think we can continue going. I'm going to get some water, and then we'll actually cut the video off at chapter 3. So from page 49 to page 58, we're going to keep reading. And I'm just going to just on the floor. Okay. Identification with the body. Apart from objects, another basic form of identification is with my body. Firstly, the body is male or female, and so the sense of being a man or a woman takes up a significant part of most people's sense of self. Gender becomes identity. Identification with gender is encouraged at an early age, and it forces you into a role, into conditioned patterns of behavior that affect all aspects of your life, not just sexuality. It is a role many people become completely trapped in, even more so in some of the traditional societies than in Western culture, where identification with gender is beginning to lessen somewhat, or a lot, by the time this this age differently. In some traditional cultures, the worst fate a woman can have is to be unwed or barren, and for a man to lack sexual potency and not be able to produce children. Life's fulfillment is perceived to be fulfillment of one's gender identity. In the West, it is the physical appearance of the body that contributes greatly to the sense of who you think you are, its strength or weakness, its perceived beauty or ugliness relative to others. For many people, their sense of self-worth is intimately bound up with their physical strength. Good looks, fitness, and external appearance. Many feel a diminished sense of self-worth because they perceive their body as ugly or imperfect. In some cases, the mental image or concept of my body is a complete distortion of reality. A young woman may think of herself as overweight and therefore starve herself when in fact she's quite thin. She cannot see her body anymore. All she sees is the mental concept of her body, which says, I am fat, or I will become fat. At the root of this condition lies identification with the mind. As people have become more and more mind-identified, which is the intensification of egoic dysfunction, There has also been a dramatic increase in the incidence of anorexia in recent decades. If the sufferer could look at her body without the interfering judgments of her mind, or even recognize those judgments for what they are instead of believing in them, or better still, if she could feel her body from within, this would initiate her healing. Those who are identified with their good looks, physical strength, or abilities experience suffering when those attributes begin to fade and disappear, as of course they will. Their very identity that was based on them is then threatened with collapse. In either case, ugly or beautiful, people derive a significant part of their identity, be it negative or positive, from their body. To be more precise, they derive their identity from the I thought that they erroneously attach to the mental image or concept of their body, which after all is no more than a physical form that shares the destiny of all forms: impermanence and ultimately decay. Equating the physical sense-perceived body that is destined to grow old, wither, and die with I always leads to suffering sooner or later. To refrain from identifying with the body doesn't mean that you neglect, despise, or no longer care for it. If it is strong, beautiful, or vigorous, you can enjoy and appreciate those attributes while they last. You can also improve the body's condition through right nutrition and exercise. If you don't equate the body with who you are when beauty fades, vigor diminishes, or the body becomes incapacitated, this will not affect your sense of worth or identity in any way. In fact, as the body begins to weaken, the formless dimension, the light of consciousness, can shine more easily through the fading form. It is not just people with good or near perfect bodies who are likely to equate it with who they are. You can just as easily identify with a problematic body and make the body's imperfection, illness, or disability into your identity. You may then think and speak of yourself as a sufferer of this or that chronic illness or disability. You receive a great deal of attention from doctors and others who constantly confirm to you your conceptual identity as a sufferer or a patient. You then unconsciously cling to the illness because it has become the most important part of who you perceive yourself to be. It has become another thought form with which the ego can identify. So once the ego has found an identity it does not want to let go, amazingly but not infrequently, the ego, in search of a stronger identity, can and does create illness in order to strengthen itself through them. Feeling the inner body. Although body identification is one of the most basic forms of ego, the good news is that it is also the one that you can most easily go beyond. This is done not by trying to convince yourself that you are not your body, but by shifting your attention from the external form of your body and from thoughts about your body, beautiful, ugly, strong, weak, too fat, too thin, to the feeling of aliveness inside it. No matter what your body's appearance is on the outer level, beyond the outer form, it is an intensely alive energy field. If you are not familiar with inner body awareness, close your eyes for a moment and find out if there is life inside your hands. Don't ask your mind. It will say, I can't feel anything. Probably will also say, give me something more interesting to think about. So instead of asking your mind, go to the hands directly. By this I mean become aware of the subtle feeling of aliveness inside them. It is there. You just have to go there with your attention to notice it. You may get a slight tingling sensation at first, then a feeling of energy or aliveness. If you hold your attention in your hands for a while, the sense of aliveness will intensify. Some people won't even have to close their eyes. They will be able to feel their inner hands at the same time as they read this. Then go to your feet. Keep your attention there for a minute or so and begin to feel your hands and feet at the same time. Then incorporate other parts of the body, legs, arms, abdomen, chest, and so on, and into that feeling until you are aware of the inner body as a global sense of aliveness. What I call the inner body isn't really the body anymore, but life energy, the bridge between form and formlessness. Make it a habit to feel the inner body as often as you can. After a while, you won't need to close your eyes anymore to feel it. For example, see if you can feel the inner body whenever you listen to someone. It almost seems like a paradox. When you are in touch with the inner body, you are not identified with your body anymore, nor are you identified with your mind. This is to say, you are no longer identified with form, but moving away from form identification toward formlessness, which we may also call being. It is your essence identity. Body awareness not only anchors you in the present moment, it is a doorway out of the prison that is the ego. It also strengthens the immune system and the body's ability to heal itself. Forgetfulness of being. Ego is always identification with form, seeking yourself and thereby losing yourself in some form. Forms are not just material objects and physical bodies. More fundamental than the external forms, things and bodies are the thought forms that continuously arise in the field of consciousness. They are energy formations, finer and less dense than physical matter, but they are forms nonetheless. What you may be aware of as a voice in your head that never stops speaking is the stream of incessant and compulsive thinking. When every thought absorbs your attention completely, when you are so identified with the voice in your head and the emotions that accompany it that you lose yourself in every thought and every emotion, then you are totally identified with form and therefore in the grip of ego. Ego is a conglomeration of recurring thought forms and conditioned mental emotional patterns that are invested with a sense of I, a sense of self. Ego arises when your sense of beingness of I am, which is formless consciousness, gets mixed up with form. This is the meaning of identification. This is forgetfulness of being, the primary error, the illusion of absolute separateness that turns reality into a nightmare. From Descartes' error to Sartre's insight. The 17th century philosopher Descartes, regarded as the founder of modern philosophy, gave expression to this primary error with his famous dictum, which he saw as primary truth. I think, therefore I am. This was the answer he found to the question, is there anything I can know with absolute certainty? He realized that the fact that he was always thinking was beyond doubt, and so he equated with thinking with being. That is to say, identity, I am, with thinking. Instead of the ultimate truth, he had found the root of the ego, but he didn't know that. It took almost 300 years before another famous philosopher saw something in that statement that Descartes, as well as everybody else, had overlooked. His name was Jean-Paul Sartre. He looked at Descartes' statement, I think, therefore I am, very deeply and suddenly realized in his own words, the consciousness that says I am is not the consciousness that thinks. What did he mean by that? When you are aware that you are thinking, that awareness is not part of thinking. It is a different dimension of consciousness. And it is that awareness that says I am. If there were nothing but thought in you, you wouldn't even know who you are thinking. You'd be like a dreamer who doesn't know he is dreaming. You'd be as identified with every thought as the dreamer is with every image in the dream. Many people still live like that, like sleepwalkers trapped in old dysfunctional mindsets that continuously recreate the same nightmarish reality. When you know you are dreaming, you are awake within the dream. Another dimension of consciousness has come in. The implication of Sartre's insight is profound, but he himself was still too identified with thinking to realize the full significance of what he had discovered. An emerging new dimension of consciousness. We just have 3 pages left and then we'll finish up the video. Because I'm going to celebrate my birthday. Doing some fun shit. And this is fun too. Don't get me wrong. I love making my videos. So, the peace that passes all understanding. There are many accounts of people who experience that emerging new dimension of consciousness as a result of tragic loss at some point in their lives. Some lost all of their possessions, others their children or spouse, their social position, reputation, or physical abilities. In some cases, through disaster or war, they lost all of these simultaneously and found themselves with nothing. We may call this a limit situation. Whatever they had identified with, whatever gave them their sense of self, had been taken away. Then suddenly and inexplicably, the anguish or intense fear they initially felt gave way to a sacred sense of presence, a deep peace and serenity and complete freedom from fear. This phenomenon must have been familiar to St. Paul, who used the expression, the peace of God which passeth all understanding. It is indeed a peace that doesn't seem to make sense, and the people who experienced it asked themselves, in the face of this, how can it be that I feel such peace? The answer is simple. Once you realize, the answer is simple. Once you realize what the ego is and how it works, When forms that you had identified with that gave you your sense of self collapse or are taken away, it can lead to a collapse of the ego, since ego is identification with form. When there is nothing to identify with anymore, who are you? When forms around you die, or death approaches, your sense of beingness, of I am, is freed from its entanglement with form. Spirit is released from its imprisonment in matter. You realize your essential identity as formless, as an all pervasive presence of being prior to all forms, all identifications. You realize your true identity as consciousness itself, rather than what consciousness had identified with. That's the peace of God. The ultimate truth of who you are is not I am this or I am that, but I am. Not everybody who experiences great loss also experiences this awakening, this disidentification from form. Some immediately create a strong mental image or thought form in which they see themselves as a victim. I've been there before. Whether it be of circumstances, other people, an unjust fate, or God, the universe. This thought form and the emotions it creates, such as anger, resentment, self-pity, and so on, they strongly identify with, and it immediately takes the place of all the other identifications that have collapsed through the loss. In other words, the ego quickly finds a new form. The fact that this new form is a deeply unhappy one doesn't concern the ego too much as long as it has an identity, good or bad. In fact, this new ego will be more contracted, more rigid, and impenetrable than the old one. Whenever tragic loss occurs, you either resist or you yield. Some people become bitter or deeply resentful. Others become compassionate, wise, and loving. Yielding means inner acceptance of what is. You are open to life. Resistance is an inner contraction, a hardening of the shell of the ego. You are closed. Whatever action you take in a state of inner resistance, which we could also call negativity, creating more outer resistance, will create more outer resistance, and the universe will not be on your side. Life will not be helpful. If the shutters are closed, the sunlight cannot come in. When you yield internally, when you surrender, a new dimension of consciousness opens up. If action is possible or necessary, your action will be in alignment with the whole and supported by creative intelligence. The unconditioned consciousness, which in a state of inner openness you become one with. Circumstances and people then become helpful, cooperative. Coincidences happen. If no action is possible, you rest in the peace and inner stillness that come with surrender. You rest in God, your own personal Jesus. Thank you for watching this video. Next, you'll see me going over chapter 3 in this book, The Core of the Ego. And yeah, peace and love. Piscean out.